Hello and welcome to this week's Formula One Grand Prix here on Eurosport. This is Ben Edwards, and over the next half an hour we take our regular look behind the scenes. Round 8 of the FIA Formula One World Championship is in Magny Cours this weekend. We take a quick preview. The event marks the final race for team manager Cesare Fiorio at Ligier, and we speak to him about his time there. We also investigate the Elf Filière, the staircase of talent supported by the French oil company, which has offered a chance to many French drivers. We also speak to Henri Pescarolo about that. Well, refuelling of cars might be a vital part of Grand Prix racing, but what about fuel for the drivers? We take a look at the work of the team chefs who have to satisfy the contrasting requirements of choosy drivers, ravenous mechanics and important guests. And we start the programme with a revealing interview with David Brown, race engineer for Williams Grand Prix, about working with some of the greatest champions in motorsport, Nigel Mansell, Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna. Williams and Renault, a combination which has achieved so much since its creation in 1989, including 2 World Drivers' Championships for Nigel Mansell and Alain Prost, and 3 Constructors' World Championships in the last 3 years. The first win came in that first season at the Canadian Grand Prix, thanks to Thierry Boutsen driving the Williams FW12C. And up until this season, Williams and Renault have been faithful to one another. This year, however, Renault is supplying the 2 top teams, and ironically, after all those years together, it was Benetton, not Williams, that allowed Renault their first win in Monaco. Another milestone came in Canada, again courtesy of Benetton, with the 100th pole position for a Renault engine. Renault certainly at the top of the tree in terms of engine manufacturers in Formula One at the moment. But of the great champions who have been powered by Renaults recently, one man is a connecting point between them. David Brown, race engineer at Williams Grand Prix, and Jochen Mass spoke to him about working with some of the world's greatest drivers.
Together, which one of the guys do you think was the best to work with, or the easiest to work with?
I like working with guys who want to succeed as much as I do, and I enjoy working with a guy who I think's good, and so I've enjoyed working with all of them because they were all bloody good. I don't think necessarily more difficult or easy, but very different approach to it. Nigel was very aggressive, not personally, but I mean towards competition. He had to dominate everybody, and motor racing for him was you turn up in practice, you dominate practice. Everything is world domination, and the way you beat people is psychological as well as being beaten on the circuit. Whereas Alan really, if he had to start from the back of the grid, he obviously didn't want to. He wanted to start from pole, but if he had to, well, he could probably still have a go at winning the race. And so for him, it was not a personal domination of the other competitors. It was just a sort of him and the machine, and he was quite happy to work with the engineers to make the machine just perfect for him. Because he never liked the car to be sideways. He always liked to be very smooth and gentle. And if anything was hard or difficult, like if he hurt his hands, because he held the steering wheel too much, it was a sort of, there must be something wrong. This isn't necessary to be like this. Surely you can make it better. Whereas Nigel would muscle the car around a tiny steering wheel and, Alan used to be a real worrier. Incredible. He probably still is. His fingernails all bitten down, and I don't think he was worried about failure. He just was worried that everything was just right. All the setup was exactly. Have I thought about this, or have I considered what happens if I use this wing instead of that wing and these tyres instead of those tyres? mean, when he came to us, he was like, Ayrton Senna, you know, you're going to run this guy. And he actually turned out to be much more of a human being than I expected, because he was supposed to be this as you said, very successful, quick, aggressive driver, you know, very sort of hard on himself and hard on the people around him. But in fact, he was interested in getting the car right and getting on with the job. And I'm quite prepared to sit down for a long time and, you know, with gear ratio charts. We used to have gear ratio charts, you know, just, I wonder what would happen if I went like this. And he just wanted to sort it all out in his mind. And then we'd get on with it. There was no sort of, oh, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. He would just get on and do the business.
For me, for visibility, you know, so you have to try to see whether we improve it.
So a fascinating look behind the scenes with David Brown, race engineer at Williams Grand Prix Engineering, and the man who's worked with some of the best. We'll be back on Formula One Grand Prix after the break. Welcome back to Formula One Grand Prix, and we take a look behind the scenes in the paddock now at the work that's going on in all of the hospitality units and the team's own units as well, to provide the food for the drivers, mechanics, guests and everyone else who has to be supplied and fed over the course of the weekend. Paul and Francis Edwards at the Williams marquee, working hard over the weekend to produce...
tasty, that's probably the best thing, eh?
Another culinary delight. Well, of course, the drivers' eating is a very major part of the weekend, and very important that they're eating exactly the right thing. In the Rothmans unit, Karl-Heinz Zimmermann is the man in charge of feeding guests over the weekend.
Also, of course, it's nice to have good friends and nice people around to do that, and the whole atmosphere makes it nice. Well, today we had two menus at 12 and 2 o'clock. Now we have some Belgian journalists. We made them some fish, sardines, gambas, lot or loup de mer, whatever we get fresh from the market. And so we change, we have a variation every day. We try what we get fresh from the market, and that's what we put on the
Sicuramente in un pilota, ma quello che non manca è la pasta.
Well, of course, the base of our cooking is pasta. The drivers like that a lot, and it's very good for them. But we have to be careful not to put too much spice in the sauce.
Un certo rendimento anche nello stomaco, diciamo.
Well, the chefs hard at work, and the drivers at the receiving end of their hard work over the course of the weekend. Fruit a major part of the diet as well. Again, energy that can be gained very, very quickly. We spoke to some of the drivers about their diets.
I'm a kind of guy that if I eat too much, I start to get fat. So I'm all the time have to be doing exercises and eating the right things. The only problem that I have, I don't take fruits very much. So vitamin C is my point that I have to improve.
Formula 1.
In Formula One, our team Minardi is recognised by everyone. We've already won prizes. You know, one eats very well with the Minardi team.
I normally have a soup beforehand, then I normally have a little bit of pasta as well. And it's just to be careful that you don't have something too heavy.
Mainly on the track, we pay special attention to what we eat, so as not obviously to be ill or have food poisoning with sauces and so on. We eat a lot of carbohydrates in order to be in top form during the weekend, especially when it's hot. We eat a lot of pasta and rice and drink lots and lots of water. We use a lot of energy drinks, but one has to be very careful so as not to show up positive if there's a doping test. So the question of what they drink is an important one. Straightforward water, not really enough to replenish some of the minerals and vitamins that are lost through the course of sweating hard, both in qualifying and, of course, mainly in the race itself. Here it comes down to a little bit of magic from the nutritionists to invent their own particular brews that will suit each individual driver. And most of the drivers nowadays having their own nutritionists and the teams as well to provide exactly the sort of energy drink that they require. This is Pierre Paladia, David Coulthard's nutritionist, saying in Formula One we try to create a product, not to go faster, because I don't think that would be possible to make a driver faster. That would surprise me somewhat. On the other hand, it's possible to create something which combats stress and fear. It's hard to say I'm going to brake 10 meters later than the others, and in order to do that we have to find a product which allows the driver to fear going beyond the limits. That's when it gets dangerous, because maybe braking 10 meters later will mean hitting the rail. That's when it's dangerous. Nonetheless, these drinks can be very important in terms of keeping the drivers fit over the course of the weekend and getting ready for a long-distance race in a hot climate.
It's easy, it's quite a lot. Most of them is water, of course. Water is very good, and some mixture of minerals or kind of vegetable or fruit juices sometimes, and some electrolytes. But I think everybody has his own little secret.
Joseph Leberer of McLaren there, explaining a little bit about what goes into these magic concoctions. But they tend to keep it all fairly secret from one another. Behind the scenes, the work goes on to come up with exactly the right recipe. We spoke to Benetton man Harold Halkewa about the products as well.
You must be an all-round man, so you do the training, the exercise, the massage, the food, yeah, the
Welcome back to Formula One Grand Prix, where we take a look now at La Filière, the scheme sponsored by ELF, which sees many young French racing drivers given the opportunity to move up through the ranks of single-seater racing. Formula Campus is the starting off point for many of these young drivers, working up through Formula Renault and then into Formula 3. We spoke to Henri Pescarolo.
La filière ELF, elle a toujours existé.
The Filière ELF has always been around, really, from the beginnings of ELF in racing. There's always been a will to try and bring young drivers up to the level of Formula One. With the Matra team, we were the first ELF drivers. Then La Filière attempted to introduce Patrick de Payeer and François Sévère into Formula One. But the newest thing, for 2 years now, is that we have a sports study centre, something that didn't exist in motorsport, which allows young gifted drivers between 16 and 17 years old to study Formula driving without stopping their other studies, which of course is fundamental. So we've created, in association with the Minister of Youth and Sport, the Education Department, the Automobile Federation and ELF, an establishment on the Le Mans track, which is a sports study centre. The students are spread around several centres in the town of Le Mans because they're not all at the same level. Some are at the baccalaureate, the O-level standard, some in technical colleges. The Wednesday, they gather at the Filière Centre for specific courses based on the automobile, in English, public relations, mechanics, aerodynamics, and then the driving lessons on the Bugatti circuit. So Formula Campus, the base for the ELF Filière, and the chance for these young drivers to show off their talents before hopefully progressing. Those who start with us have a season in what is called Formula Campus. This is the starting formula. It's an open wheeler with 105 horsepower Renault engine. It's an excellent way to start their career. They run a dozen races, get to know the French circuits, and they start to get used to competing. And at the end of the campus season, we choose between 6 and 8 of them who will go up one level to Formula Renault.
Qui eux monteront d'un échelon, c'est-à-dire ils iront en Formule Renault au sein de la filière.
The heart of La Filière, there are 12 cars racing. 6 are driven by those repeating a year in Formula Renault, and the other 6 are the newcomers that we've brought up. The best 4 will progress then to Formula 3, and then the best 2 to Formula 3000, and perhaps 1 will go to Formula 1. Many of the French drivers in Formula 1 have come from schools sponsored by ELF, in fact all of them. There isn't one French driver who hasn't passed by La Filière without being involved at some stage or other. So who knows, at the moment in the lower ranks of La Filière, perhaps there's a future world champion waiting to make it to the ranks of Grand Prix racing. The French Grand Prix in Magny marks the departure of Cesare Fiorio from the Ligier team. Moving on, with Tom Walkinshaw now very much in charge of the Ligier team, and really no room for Fiorio as well, but nonetheless reflecting on his time spent with the French team. Well, I think I'm concluding my time with Ligier pretty well. I'm happy to have contributed to its elevation in the hierarchy of Formula One. Today we are 6th in the championship, 1 more race and then I'm back to Italy. Well, since Fiorio joined, of course, Ligier's fortunes have improved a bit, and certainly at Hockenheim in Germany last year. 2nd place for Olivier Panis and Eric Bernard in 3rd, the best result in his time there. Well, you should remember that where we were 1 year ago when I arrived in the team. Today, after having been back in 22nd and 23rd in qualifying, we're now up in the top 10. We've advanced very well, we've had good results, and I'm happy. I really think that we can be satisfied. After the French Grand Prix at Magny, I hope to leave a well-organised and structured team to my successor.
Spero di lasciare a chi gestirà la Ligier dopo di me una buona squadra ben organizzata e affidabile.
And what about your future, we asked.
Da ancora più vecchio.
He says, I'm getting older, we'll see. But I think you can be sure to see me again in Formula One, perhaps in the month of September. And the story goes that Cesare Fiorio is likely to be back with the Forti team. 40 Ford cars, perhaps coming under his jurisdiction soon. French Grand Prix then this weekend at Magny. We're taking a quick look over the past 4 races at this part of France, in the Nièvre region of France, and one of the newest circuits on the Grand Prix calendar. Up until 1991, the French Grand Prix was at Paul Ricard's circuit, Le Castellet, as well as having been at other circuits in the past. But in 1991, a terrible start from Riccardo Patrese on pole position saw the early lead go to Alain Prost in the Ferrari. But it didn't take too much longer later in the race for Nigel Mansell to charge his way up into the lead, Prost into second place, and Ayrton Senna coming through to finish third in the McLaren. 3 champions atop the podium in Magny for the first race on this circuit. The following year saw slightly different weather conditions, and in fact the race was stopped after 18 laps because of the rain and then restarted and made into a 2-part race. Patrese led the early laps, but it was Nigel Mansell who came through once again to take his second victory at the Magny circuit. The superiority of the Williams was noted, with second position for Riccardo Patrese, and a good third place for Martin Brundle, driving for Benetton in 1992. It also marked a good result for Lotus on that occasion, with Mika Hakkinen finishing in 4th place and Johnny Herbert in 6th. 1993, Alain Prost making his return to Formula One racing after a break in 1992 and coming back to take victory in France. It was quite a battle between him and Damon Hill. In fact, Hill led the first 26 laps, then dropping dutifully behind, but showing to Prost all the way through the race that he felt that he could well have won this race if there hadn't been team orders to consider. Joining Prost and Hill on the podium, Michael Schumacher finishing in 3rd. And it was Schumacher who went on to take the victory last year in 1994. Pole position went to Damon Hill, and it was a race that saw the return of Nigel Mansell to the Williams team. But Michael Schumacher made a blistering start from the second row of the grid and was never headed for the rest of the afternoon. A dominant performance from Schumacher, and at this time in the season, it was looking as though he was dominating the championship. Remember, it was just before all the dramas of Silverstone. Schumacher coming through to take the win, with Damon Hill in 2nd and Gerhard Berger in 3rd. This weekend you'll be able to watch all of the qualifying live here on Eurosport, plus the warm-up and the race itself. We're looking forward to a great Grand Prix. Can Jean Alesi repeat his victory from Canada? Will the Ferraris be strong? You'll be able to join myself, Ben Edwards, and John Watson this weekend. See you from Magny.